not a date night movie.
No, not a date night movie. I think it was Jean-Luc Godard, actually, who said that if you and your spouse don't like the same films, it will lead to divorce, which I don't think is true, but he did say it. Well, let's not dilly-dally.
Yeah, 1 hour later. Okay, cool. Okay.
You think we're trying to put it off or what?
Yeah, we are.
Let's just go.
Welcome to A Century in Cinema. I'm Arthur.
And I'm Andrew.
And this is a podcast where we discuss a classic film from every year, starting in 1920. Today's film is from 1926. It's A Page of Madness.
Directed by Tenosuke Kinugasa.
A Page of Madness is available on Amazon Prime to rent for $1.99. But I also just found it on YouTube at kind of a not great quality, but it was watchable.
Yeah. And I just bought the Blu-ray because that's the kind of person I am.
Hell yeah. And honestly, there's not a ton going on in 1926, at least what's relevant to us and what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Hirohito is crowned the Emperor of Japan. That's important. And it's interesting, Japan, it's part of the Axis alliance during World War II, but they're not like Italy. They're not like Germany. At least from what I understand, Emperor Hirohito doesn't have as much power, at least directly, over the actions of Japan during World War II. It feels more like there are cabals of people around the emperor that are sort of pushing Japan into a more imperial direction. And Hirohito is not sort of this fascist dictator in the same way that we think of Hitler or Mussolini. Rudolph Valentino dies in 1926. He's one of the early Hollywood celebrities in the United States. He plays the Sheik in a 1921 film. And there's turf wars going on with Al Capone. Prohibition is still a thing in the U.S. So that's 1926. Let's talk about A Page of Madness. This is a weird film.
This is a very strange film. This is considered an early example of narrative scrambling and experimental imagery in film. So you had to go into it knowing that, which I did.
I'm glad I did too.
If I'd have gone into this thinking I'm about to get like a full narrative experience, I think I would have been disappointed. I don't know. Let's just jump into this, Arthur. How did you feel about this movie? What was your automatic reaction to watching this?
My automatic reaction to watching A Page of Madness was that I was not watching a movie. I don't even know if this film is that experimental, but it feels more like an artifact. It feels like something that was uncovered and put into a museum, but we don't have the full history. We don't have the full picture of it. And as you said last week, it was presented with a storyteller in the theater, what the Japanese film industry at the time called a benshi. These were people who would narrate over the film. They would speak for the actors. They would give exposition. They would fill in information that wasn't quite clear. This was over silent films. And they were very popular at the time. But without the storyteller, the benshi, to accompany this film, it feels like we're only getting half of the picture. And there's also, there's scenes missing from it, I understand. It just feels very disjointed, and it doesn't feel like you're watching a film that is complete.
I'll go ahead and give a quick synopsis of this. Keep in mind, this synopsis is pulled from me watching the film as well as me reading a plot description, but this is about a man who gets a job in an insane asylum as a janitor, and the reason he gets that job is because his wife, who killed their baby and attempted suicide, has been put in there, and he thinks that him being around and him being a presence in her life will help her regain her sanity. He brings their daughter to come to the asylum and tries to get them to reconnect. The mom freaks out on her. She has a kind of a horrible experience at this asylum and is actually physically assaulted by 2 male inmates. They don't succeed. She's able to get away, and she runs away and never comes back. And now, with almost no hope of regaining any sort of normalcy in his life, the husband starts to go crazy, and it turns into a series of visions, dreams, hallucinations, however you want to see them, of him breaking the wife out, putting these happy masks on people and trying to give off an illusion of them being happy. He has one where he attacks a guard, but then he's just a janitor. And the daughter has a potential husband. There's this weird implication that the father might even be looking at his own daughter as a potential replacement for his wife during one sequence. So the whole movie is supposed to make you feel a little off-kilter, a little uncomfortable. To my knowledge, and this is kind of harder to lock down, but to my knowledge, the only scene missing is a scene from the very end, which shows the daughter getting married to her husband. And I also want to circle back on the narration part, having educated myself a little bit further since watching it and saying that is absolutely true. However, this film was thought to be lost until 1971, when Kinugasa himself found it in his garden shed, and he commissioned the new soundtrack, and to all records and knowledge was 100% the force behind this being restored, being available again in its current state. So in its current state, with no narration, which was definitely possible in the 70s, and with just this music that you hear with it, that is how he himself re-released it. So take with that what you will. When I learned about the whole, him finding this film print in his garden shed and commissioning the soundtrack and stuff, I was thinking, like, he clearly, like, I think he wanted this to be an experimental film, like, to come across that way from the very beginning. Watching it in this way is definitely the way he is intending it to be watched. This is how it was re-released in the 70s when he did the big re-release with no storyteller and with this soundtrack on it.
That's interesting to me, because there is another version of this film that exists that is a lot more clear, I would imagine. Now, it's important to note that the original, like, benchy script that the storyteller would have been reading is lost. That does not exist anymore. We have no reference what was being said before. So maybe it was just as experimental as the film itself, and sort of esoteric, avant-garde. No idea. You know, if it's an experimental, sort of avant-garde film that Kinugasa intended to be that way, I guess I have to concede to that. Definitely while I was watching it, though, I did feel like, comparatively, like, it felt like I was watching a movie without any sound, you know? Like, I just felt like something was missing. But maybe that's just me knowing that there used to be a Benchy. I don't know.
I want to ask you this. Would you consider yourself a fan of experimental films such as Brakhage or Maya Deren?
No, I don't think I am.
Okay. I do really enjoy experimental film. And for me, this was great. But this movie is the toughest sell we've had so far, I think. It is not long, but I won't lie, it does feel long. You do sort of feel lost in it, and that starts very early. There's this beautiful image of a spinning orb and this woman dancing in front of it, and even though we know because of other sources this is a hallucination of the wife in the cell, that's not immediately clear when you're just watching the film. For me personally, the first time I watched this was without reading any plot description. And I knew it was a janitor, obviously, but I thought that he was just in love with the woman, or I could tell that they knew each other, and I pretty much garnered that they had some sort of former relationship. I didn't gather that they were a husband and wife. I didn't gather the girl who he brought in was their daughter. And the ending, especially when he was attacking the guards, I thought was all literally happening in the narrative. So when he was just cleaning again, I got extremely confused. But all that to be said, the reason why you watch experimental film is for the imagery and for the experimentation they're doing with the camera. And I think if you're looking at this film purely for its aesthetic and its cinematography, I think it is a win. I think it's a beautiful movie.
Compared to a lot of the stuff that we've watched so far, definitely agree. You know, the fact that they're even moving the camera, dollying it, feels so kind of novel in this time period. I know other filmmakers were doing that at the time, but it did stick out to me after we watched 5 other films where that's not really a thing that's happening.
Yeah.
But you have a similar sort of feel that you got in Eisenstein's montage, especially at the beginning of this film when we're being introduced to the asylum and the rain and the wheels turning through the mud and everything. There's a lot of just bizarre shots and sequences as I scan through the movie. There's double exposure going on. There's weird sort of lighting tricks. There's strange camera movements. There's interesting cuts. There's all sorts of stuff that are interesting from a cinematic perspective itself, not necessarily a narrative perspective. There's some great sequences in this that do set the mood. So I understand the experimental tone, but I was never quite as engaged as I'd like to be. But I understand that that's probably not the point.
And, you know, I'll be the first, like I already said, I thought this film felt like a solid 2 hours. And it's only 71 minutes. But just the mental space it took for me watching it, I felt like it took 2 hours to watch. And I don't really mean that as a criticism. I know that sort of thing is said about films all the time as if they're boring or slow, but there's just so much content. And every shot is telling some sort of new story visually and attempted narratively as well. So there's just a lot to take in, and I just sort of felt myself getting really folded into the world, even though I won't lie, at certain points I was a little bored with parts of it. I can be honest about that, and I can say, you know, I still enjoyed this film, even though there were certain moments. I thought it was all worth it for the final sequence with his crazy hallucinations. I thought every single one of them was more entertaining than the last. And I thought there was something very poetic about him putting the happy face masks on everyone.
I think that might have been my favorite scene. I think, you know, the symbolism there made sense to me. There's a lot of probably symbolic elements in this film that don't make sense to me because I'm not a Japanese audience in the 1920s. Probably a lot of stuff is just lost on me. I understand that, but I did love that scene.
I did imagine just what it would feel like to go to a theater and, you know, like people had to have applauded the storyteller when it came out to just like have this live performance happening in front of these crazy images. That would be more like a night at the theater than a night at the movies for me.
For sure. I was going to say that I can't find any information about anything sort of like a Benshi existing in any other film industry around the world at this time. It seems to be kind of an exclusively Japanese thing.
I just sort of wish there was a way to experience that. It sounds so magical to me.
It reminds me of going to, there's a local venue here in Salt Lake City that does silent film screenings.
The Organ Loft.
The Organ Loft, yeah. And the person who plays the organ accompanies the film is sort of like a little local hero. Everyone knows him. He comes out. I imagine that the Benshi was similar in Japanese culture. From what I understand, they were almost like movie stars themselves.
I love that place. Yeah, and so I guess in a way I have experienced that, and that does make me feel a little more satisfied. But the Organ Loft should do this movie and play its soundtrack that he commissioned, and they should do a script with it. I would write that script.
That would be amazing, yeah.
And the commissioned soundtrack is not just music. There's a lot of sound effects in this, especially with like lightning crashes and certain, like there's rumblings and stuff during it when tensions are high. It is all done with instruments, so it's all still technically music, but it's definitely timed to these moments in the film. It was not a huge surprise to me to find out this soundtrack was commissioned in the 70s. My first time watching it, I didn't know any of this. I hadn't done any research yet. I just wanted to watch it. And that was my first thought when it started was, this is a way more modern soundtrack than anything else we've really been watching up to this point.
Did you watch A Page of Madness more than once?
I should have.
I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like my go-to assumption is that I watch a film once, I get it.
Little Pauline Kael moment.
But certainly there's other films. There's plenty of films that as I keep watching them more and more, I appreciate them more and more. And maybe A Page of Madness is like that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of revisiting films. I feel like every time I revisit any film, there's always something I missed or forgot about. I get so wrapped up in aesthetics automatically. That's how my brain works. And so my first time watching a film truly is like, it's very visual for me, mostly. I'm trying to see what story you're telling me with the images you're putting on the screen. So, I think there are people who are on both sides of that. But part of that, there's more of a pressure when it comes to analyzing film and talking about film to understand a plot and a narrative than there really is to, like, understand aesthetics in a film. So, because of that, and because how much I love to talk about film with people, I've just become very accustomed to, if I really like a movie, I'm going to go see it again. So I would definitely be watching this one again, without question.
Yeah, and I feel like it would probably get better the more you watch it.
I even think there's just something about seeing something again just makes you a little bit more aware of it. Even just knowing this is when it will end, your brain automatically doesn't have that weird wondering what's going to happen next, when it's going to come to a close. And I think that our brains automatically do that. And that yearning in and of itself can sort of make a film seem longer than it actually is.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing I've learned from revisiting so many films, is that the second time, it doesn't matter if it's a 3-hour film, it just feels so much shorter every time you revisit it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. This would feel a lot shorter.
I have no basis for this, but even that final scene missing of the girl marrying the husband, who, to my knowledge, we never meet within the film. I don't think we ever meet her potential husband.
The bearded man?
Oh. Is that who that's supposed to be?
I think so. But I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, because, yeah, Wikipedia even says that at the end you see the bearded inmate pass by and he bows as if he's someone bowing to a father-in-law. And that detail is like, I did not catch that. And I didn't know any of the plot details or anything like that when I first watched it. So we should have watched it twice. But that wasn't a part of the deal when we came to recording this. And, I don't mind recording this fresh take either. I could feel the ideas coming off the screen, not just aesthetically with all the experimentation, but with the narrative itself and trying to fold something together by purposefully keeping your audience off track. It sort of makes you as an audience member feel like you don't have a full grasp on things. And that method of being able to imbue an emotion of an actual reaction out of your audience is something that's just something that I love about film. I felt a little uneasy. I felt a little uncomfortable. I felt confused. And the film itself is about a man who's feeling those exact same things. And, I think it's amazing when you can actually elicit empathy from an audience based off of the aesthetic quality of your product. This is the kind of movie that's right up my alley. I will probably watch this movie at least 3 more times before this year is up. And I do want to give a shout out to Flicker Alley, a distributor who I'd never heard of before, but they have released this on Blu-ray in a package with another film called Portrait of a Young Man, which I have not watched yet. But I think making sure this type of film is available to people is very important. I think there is an audience for a movie like this, and I was very impressed with the presentation. So, as far as I know, this is a kind of a smaller company, and I just want to drop a little shout out to them because I thought they did a really good job with this packaging and this release, and I'm very grateful that this exists. So I
remember when I was growing up and Godzilla movies were so hard to find. until small little companies like that would pick them up, get the copyright, and release like a good enough DVD or Blu-ray that we could finally feel like we were watching the movie instead of a bootleg VHS.
Warner Brothers, quit being cowards and release Ken Russell's The Devils on Blu-ray, please. That's all I'm going to say. But
there's also a there's a book that's written by a Michigan professor, Aaron Giroux. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Who knows? Just called A Page of Madness, Cinema and Modernity in 1920s Japan. And that seems to be sort of the go-to English resource for this film. But it's like $50 on Amazon, and it's also just out of stock. So good luck finding that. I would have appreciated skimming a book like that, where someone really does a deep dive into this and analyzes it, but that resource isn't just readily available.
I fully believe, like, dedicating the right amount of time to this film, you could find infinite interpretations in it.
One interpretation of this film, I don't even know if this is like a real interpretation, but I understand that the Japanese emperor at this time, there were rumors that he might have been going through some psychological episodes.
In the book of his brain, there was a page of madness.
This film might be commenting on some sort of state that the Japanese emperor was in at the time. Again, I'm not a Japanese audience member in the 1920s. I'm not sure. At least in 1926, the Japanese emperor passed away, and his son Hirohito was crowned the new emperor of Japan in December. I don't know if there's some sort of political commentary in this film, but it's possible.
Yeah, I think that there are sort of like infinite readings into this. That is one of the beautiful things about experimental cinema. One of the reasons it keeps me coming back. And I could see how someone could take this thing politically. It does. I can't explain this, so I'm not even going to try. But there does seem to be some sort of like political undertone to this whole thing.
There's like an authoritarian doctor figure in this film.
There are these weird moments in the film as far as the world it is setting up that does make it feel like it is more of an allegory than anything else. The Page of Madness scholar who's listening to this, the only person probably listening to this, he can go in the comments, or she can go in the comments and just be like, actually, that is this person, and that'll be fine with that. And we'll
appreciate it.
Yes, I will be absolutely fine with that.
I feel a little stupid watching this film.
Well, that's unfair to yourself. You know, that's part of watching experimental film, in my opinion, too. And, like, it's not about feeling stupid, it's about knowing that the message being given in this film is purposefully esoteric. You know, you see something that has, like, a huge budget, like Terrence Malick's Tree of Life. That one I really did see 4 times in theaters. And I mean, I've even seen the extended cut that was released and stuff. And let me tell you, all these years later, and I could not tell you what that film's plot is supposed to be. It's a very, very strange film, but when I'm watching it, I feel this weird, like, affirmation in the mystery and happiness of life. And I love the way that movie makes me feel. And that's how I feel with Page of Madness. I don't necessarily love the way it makes me feel, the feeling itself, but I love that it can make me feel that. So I don't think it's a matter of, like, intelligence as far as being able to interpret the film. I think that what people get out of a film is equally important to what was intended to be put into it. And, like, if what you got out of it, I'm not saying this is what, but if someone watching this who's following along or anything were to watch this and think this movie has no story and didn't tell me anything and didn't make me feel anything, I think that's a totally valid reading of it.
I'm glad you bring up Tree of Life, because that is like a quote-unquote experimental film that does work for me. The impression that it leaves on me is impactful, and I really do think that works for me. But I also know a ton of people who really don't like the Tree of Life, and I kind of just, have to shrug and say that's totally valid.
And I think there's a lot of that in A Page of Madness as well. This screenwriter, Yasunari Kawabata, actually won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1968 I haven't read any of his other things, but just knowing that this was written by someone who is more of a novelist, that in itself is sort of a fold for me, that this film is semi-novelistic, but I can tell when I'm watching it. There's a million references going right over my head. There's all of these influences and original ideas being put on the screen that I will never know the root cause of.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of just enjoyed being able to sit back and watch the fruits of someone else's efforts.
Yeah, did you do any more looking into who wrote this? There's 4 writers credited that I see.
I just know Yasunori Kawabata was credited with the original story.
Okay.
But the scenario, there's a version of the scenario that is printed in his complete works, but it's considered a collaboration between him, the director, and then 2 other men. I'd be interested in reading his original short story for this, which is published in his complete works. But I have no idea how to get my hands on that. I haven't looked into it at all. But, yeah, I mean, I talked a lot about this, I feel. I feel like I sort of took center stage for this one.
It's such a difficult film to talk about. I came to the conclusion early on, like, this is not a film that's for me.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that I don't like reviewing films anymore is that sometimes I'm okay accepting that they're not for me.
I've pretty much crawled completely away from doing actual reviews of films.
Like a 5-star review, like a, 7.8 out of 10 IMDb score like that.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes, the film is absolute garbage, but I love it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I understand that it's an amazing film, but I just can't stand it.
I definitely thought this was one of the more interesting ones we've watched so far. I mean, I've found them all interesting in their own right, but this one especially. So, yeah. If people hear this and it gives them somehow hesitations towards watching it, just sit back and watch it. Like it's I think it's definitely worth your 71 minutes. You might really find something in it that you love, and it might really compel you.
Give it a try.
Yeah, this is the kind of cinema that I think can go undiscovered and unwatched for long periods of time by culture, like just because culturally people aren't as interested in this sort of thing, and I think that's a shame. I want to take a moment and talk about the artwork for this film. I think it is fantastic.
The cover art with the mask, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's great.
You show me a poster like that, I'm gonna watch your movie.
I'm in, yeah.
Yeah, like I love it. I think it's a beautiful drawing. And it has the vibe of the movie. It's got this sort of unhinged quality to it. I think it's the gums being like stretched in 4 different directions. That makes it so creepy.
Did you know that Akira Kurosawa, famed Japanese director later on in the century, we know him. His brother was a benshi during this time period.
Oh.
But his brother committed suicide in 1933 after the art form kind of faded away.
Oh, whoa.
But yeah, like a lot of silent film stars around the world, benshis just didn't transition into the sound era of film, and they kind of found themselves very quickly without any sort of place in the industry.
Yeah, that's very sad. I didn't know that.
Like you said, I would be very curious to watch this film or another film with some sort of performance artist narrating, giving a storytelling performance. I think that's a really interesting way to do silent film. What are we watching next week?
Next week, kind of a complete turnaround. This movie we knew nothing about. Next week, we're watching Fritz Lang's Metropolis, and we're specifically going to be speaking about the Giorgio Moroder cut of Metropolis. And yes, that Giorgio Moroder, the DJ, the electronic artist. I've seen this film many, many times, and have even written a paper on it before. Yeah, it's going to be very different from this one, where we literally had no idea what was going on the whole time.
I feel like I've seen Metropolis available on Amazon Prime or Netflix in the past, but as of September 2020, it is not on my radar. I see that it's available on Mubi to stream. Otherwise, it's available to rent for $2.99 on Amazon Prime. $2.99 on Amazon Prime.
And even before that, I mean, that's going to be the 2010 restoration that's available. The Giorgio Moroder cut from 1984 is not going to be available for streaming. It was a Kino DVD Blu-ray release that they did. I actually think that it is still available from them. We'll definitely be talking about the 2001 cut and the 2010 cut. The 2010 cut is considered the definitive version of the film, even though it is still missing a couple of scenes. It is considered the fullest version we will probably ever have. And it's an incredible film. Blew my mind when I first watched it.
Yeah, for sure. It is just a staple of silent cinema. It's a classic. A huge thank you to Nathan Royal for our show's music. If you're enjoying A Century in Cinema, we'd love if you took a second to help support the show. Easiest way to do that is just to subscribe, give us a nice rating and a review for those internet algorithms, and to recommend us to someone else who likes movies, someone else looking for a new podcast. Thanks a lot to you, our listeners, and we'll have a new episode next week. See you then. I just want to give a shout out to all our Patreon members who keep the show running. Thank you all. You too can become a patron and get access to bonus episodes linked down in the show notes. You're listening on YouTube now, so like and subscribe and comment down below. Tell us if you've seen the film. What did you think of it? Did we miss anything? Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you for the next one.